Exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series. We're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. The bracket for March Madness was just announced last night. You're going to go through and pick your bracket by choosing which team you think will win each matchup. What skill is demonstrated by picking teams you think are going to win? So we're looking at a skill here and what you are demonstrating by picking teams you think are going to win. Now, in this bracket, you have different matchups with different teams. So let's say you have Team A and Team B. In order to choose between those teams, what must you be able to do? Well, you've got to be able to discriminate between stimuli. Very basic stimulus discrimination would simply be something like identifying different colors. If we go a little more advanced, well, let's say we have again Team A and Team B, and you're able to discern or identify the differences in Team A and Team B and pick one or the other. So the skill you're demonstrating by picking between multiple teams is A, stimulus discrimination. With response differentiation, we are engaging in different responses and we're choosing between different responses. Here, the only response we have is choosing. And so we're just choosing different teams. So we're more worried about the stimuli rather than the different responses. Differential reinforcement is not necessarily a skill that we demonstrate. It's what we use to teach skills or teach discrimination or teach differentiation. And then D, the Premack principle doesn't apply here. The Premack principle says we are using the opportunity to engage in a highly preferred response as reinforcement for a lower preferred response. Obviously does not apply here. The skill most demonstrated here is stimulus discrimination. You, a behavior technician, are at a client's house placing a behavior on extinction. The client's mom walks in and asks that you please don't ignore her child when they are engaging in tantrum behavior. How should you respond? So this can be a tricky situation for a technician. And in this case, you're the technician, you're at the client's house, and you're using extinction. Now, extinction can be pretty intense, as we know, right? It can cause extinction burst. And a lot of times it does look like we're just ignoring the child. But we know with extinction, what we're actually doing is withholding reinforcement for a behavior. So even though it might look like ignoring, it isn't necessarily what you're doing. However, the mom said, please don't do this. Don't ignore my child. As the technician, what should you do in this situation? You can't not listen to the parent, but you also know you have a specific behavior plan in place. A, explain that this is part of the behavior plan and continue regardless of the parent's protest. You should explain that this is part of the plan and you're doing the right thing, but we can't just continue even if the parent continues to tell us to stop. B, explain that this is part of the behavior plan, continue no matter what, and contact your supervisor. We do want to explain, we do want to contact the supervisor, but again, we're not just going to continue no matter what. We have to take into account what this mom is telling us. C, explain that this is part of the behavior plan. Continue only if the parent agrees and contact your supervisor. Yes, we're going to explain this is part of the plan. We'll continue if the parent agrees, and we're going to tell the supervisor no matter what. Even if the parent allows us to continue, we still want to let the supervisor know the situation in case the supervisor needs to come back and retrain or re-explain what's going on. And then D, stop the extinction procedure immediately. No, you're doing the right thing. You're using extinction. So maybe you just needed to remind the parent of what's going on. However, if you do let them know what's going on and they still tell you, please don't do that, then we need to stop. Regardless, we've got to tell the supervisor about what happened. A community recreation center implements a health initiative to encourage members to sanitize gym equipment after use. Initially, staff provide frequent praise and reminders. Later, as they reduce reminders and feedback, patrons continue consistently sanitizing equipment without prompting. Which concept best describes the patron's behavior? So looking at the behavior of these patrons or these members, and we know the community center is trying to implement a health initiative for these members to sanitize gym equipment. They are providing frequent praise and reminders, so reinforcement and prompts. Then they start to reduce the prompts and the reinforcement, yet patrons continue to sanitize equipment. So, what do we call it when we teach something, we reinforce something, and then we start fading out the teaching and reinforcement, and yet the skill continues? Well, that's going to be maintenance, right? The patrons are maintaining the sanitizing behavior even without the prompting, even without the constant feedback and reinforcement. Maintenance is very important. We want skills to continue even if we're not explicitly reinforcing or teaching them. B, stimulus generalization, and C, response generalization. Maintenance is kind of a subset of generalization, but we're not talking stimulus or response generalization here. Stimulus generalization occurs when a single response happens in the presence of multiple stimuli in untrained situations. Here, we're not generalizing because we're just sanitizing the same gym equipment that they were taught and reinforced to sanitize over and over again. Response generalization occurs when new novel responses occur in the presence of a single stimulus. Well, the responses aren't changing, right? It's still the same responses. They're just maintaining despite the prompting and teaching and consequences going away. So the concept best describing the patron's behavior given the information is maintenance. A behavior analyst conducting in-home services observes that whenever a client is given difficult puzzles, the client immediately starts crying, prompting the removal of the puzzles. Over sessions, puzzle presentation continues to evoke crying. Based on these observations, what reinforcement contingency is maintaining the client's crying behavior? So we know immediately it's going to be a reinforcement contingency. Reinforcement increases behavior. And we're looking at the client's crying behavior. So if the behavior is crying, what consequence follows the crying behavior? We're seeing this analyst is observing that the client is given a difficult puzzle, which is our antecedent. The client starts crying, the behavior, and what happens as a result of the crying? The puzzle is removed. So in consequence questions, if we can identify an antecedent, a behavior, and then the consequence, obviously, it becomes very simple from there. Antecedent, give puzzle, behavior, cry, consequence, puzzle removed. So when we have a situation where behavior is increasing or maintaining by the removal of something, what do we call that? A, positive reinforcement. Well, it is reinforcement. We know that both from the question and the behavior change, but it isn't positive. Positive, we're adding something as a consequence. The consequence here is the removal of the puzzle. So what we're looking at here is B, negative reinforcement. We are removing something from the environment, which is reinforcing the behavior, negative reinforcement. C, automatic reinforcement. Automatic versus socially mediated. These are the two type of contingencies we can use for reinforcement. An automatic reinforcement situation is when we have a person who is self-administering the consequence. In other words, there's not another person involved. Socially mediated means another person is actually providing the consequence. And in this case, someone else is involved in the situation, making this a socially mediated reinforcement situation, not automatic. And then D, a variable interval, obviously has nothing to do with this question. If you know your basic schedules, you're not going to pick D. Fluency is very important because if you're fluent, then you look at D and say, well, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And you can quickly rule that answer choice out. So the reinforcement contingency maintaining crying behavior here is B, negative reinforcement. During meetings, Alina used to rarely speak up. Recently, whenever she shares ideas, colleagues enthusiastically ask follow-up questions and implement some of her suggestions. Over time, Alina participates more frequently in meetings, contributing even more insightful ideas. Which principle explains Alina's behavior change? Okay, another behavior principle question, and behavior change principles are three main ones: are reinforcement, extinction, and punishment. And with all behavior change principle, change questions, we have to ask ourselves, how is the behavior changing? In this case, we have Alina, who used to rarely speak up. Now, when she is sharing ideas, colleagues ask follow-up questions and implement suggestions. Alina is now participating more frequently. So Alina's behavior has done what? It's increased. If it's increased, we know it's got to be reinforcement. Punishment and extinction only decrease, reinforcement increases. So we know it's reinforcement. Now, the consequence where Alina shares ideas and then the colleagues are asking questions and implementing some of her suggestions, the follow up questions and the implementation is that positive or negative? That's going to be positive. They're adding something to the environment. So the principle that's explaining Alina's behavior change is a positive reinforcement. Now, we can see from both of these questions back to back, if we can identify the clear antecedent, the clear behavior, clear consequence, it's very easy to pick out what's changing behavior. The most important thing we have to ask ourselves is the behavior increasing or decreasing? And then are we adding or taking something away? If you can answer those questions, it becomes very simple. B, for example, positive punishment. Well, Elena's behavior increases, it can't be punishment. B is out. Same with D, negative punishment. We know immediately it's not punishment because Alina's behavior increased. So C, that leaves negative reinforcement. Well, the follow-up questions and the implementations were added, it has to be positive. The principle explaining Alina's behavior change is A, positive reinforcement. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.